I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are continuing in the Gospels. We are in the last week, the Holy Week. Christ has gone to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, and he had been arrested. The last thing we read was his trial before the priests. We read this in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and how they brought many witnesses, but they couldn't get two witnesses to agree on the same accusation. So they were having difficulties in finding anything to accuse him of. We read all that. Now we're going to turn to John. And here in John we are going to read of these same trials, and a little extra. I also want to point out here that there is no Joseph Smith translation for this chapter of John. John chapter 18, verses 13 through 27. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, who was the high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He saith, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there, who made a fire of coals, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. We're getting a bit more information here. So we have two disciples who are going, not just Peter. The other disciple is not named, possibly John, but it is a disciple that is known by the high priest. And considering that when they see Peter, they say, aren't you one of those 12? That's what they say, aren't you one of the 12? And Peter denies it, but if it was John, if it was any of the 12, wouldn't they also have been recognized as one of the 12? So I take it that this disciple, in this particular instance at least, is not John, but is just a disciple of Christ who knew both Peter and the high priest. He goes in first, and Peter waits outside, and then he comes out. It's like he's getting permission for Peter to come in and kind of witness the trial. When he gets in there, some of the servants recognize Peter, but he denies it. This is our first denial. Now we continue, verse 19. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me, what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest, and Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said therefore unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it, and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew. So we have this initial trial phase to the high priest. But this doesn't seem to be really a trial, but just a hearing before the high priest, and they're asking him about his disciples. Where are your disciples? What have you been teaching? And they say, well, they know what I've been teaching. I didn't teach anything secretly. Ask them. Now, this is a much different, in the other three Gospels, Christ stays silent through all the questioning until the very end, when he declares himself not only to be the Son of God, but that he will return in glory. And that is what they used finally to condemn him. But here in John, at least right now, he is answering them. He's just saying, he was not answering them, he's saying, this was all done publicly. I don't need to repeat myself. He's basically saying, if you can find a witness against me, then you find a witness against me. Don't expect me to help you out with that. It's very interesting. And we also have this account of Peter's denial. Now, he denies once before the trial starts, and then he denies twice after the trial. So it's kind of broken up here in John, which is why I've decided to read this portion of John as a separate video. But note also that, the first time it was a servant, the second time another servant, the third time It was the man that Peter had cut the ear off of. This is a guy that got up close and personal with Peter. He recognizes him. So this is Malchus. And he's saying, "You were the one that attacked me." Peter still denies it. Now, that's the end of the story there. We don't have any other details about Peter's denials, just that he denies him 3 times, and then the cock crowed. And this is in fulfillment of Christ's prophecy, that Peter would deny him 3 times before the cock crowed. But I'm not going to say any more about that. We're going to leave the video here, because our next video we will read about Peter's denial in the other 3 Gospels. So I will see you there.